Hey everyone,
Welcome back to the Nine Gates podcast. I'm Victoria Jaye. I am the demon folklorist.
and I'm James Annitto, the demonologist. Welcome everybody.
Yeah, welcome. Today, I'm so personally excited because this is a topic near and dear to my heart because I wrote a book about it called Hell, Horror, and Despair, Demonic Fantasy and Film. Um, I came across Steve A. Wiggins, who is our guest for tonight, when I was in the midst of writing because he came up in, I believe, actually, Joseph Laycock's book, The Exorcist Effect. And I was like, oh, obviously I got to read everybody that he cited to be able to talk about horror films and the way that they've sort of impacted the way we tell stories. Um, and that led to my concept of demonic fantasy, where people are coming away with really weird, inaccurate information. I wanted to know why. And here we are. But he is literally, if you read my book, he's every other citation. So I'm super excited that he's here.
Yeah, I know. When you presented him as a possible option, I started watching his YouTube videos. Like, I partake in books, wrote some books myself, but I have
I'm
a
a big
busy
reader.
life. I have a busy life, two children running around, so it's hard for me to sometimes just. And by the time I'm in bed ready to read a book, I'm already zonked out. But after you brought him up, I was like, I would love to get him for you. I see from reading your book in Microsoft Word, of course. I saw that before you published it, that he had a great impact on you. And we met actually from your second book. You interviewed me for it. So, and I am in it towards the end. But we clicked, and this is what became Nine Gates podcast. So when you brought him up, I thought, okay, I don't know the guy from a hole in a wall, but let me do my best to reach out. And he was so accessible. Reached out to me not too long afterwards, and we've chatted back and forth through email, and it's very gracious. From his videos that I've watched, very smart, and his degree as well carries
And
that. I
super
won't.
funny. I can tell that from his books that he's
Yeah,
funny.
on his videos, you see that quirky humor, and I love it. I love an academic that is quirky and can express themselves. So you see their love in it, and he expresses that, of course, in his video, and I can only imagine his books. But yeah, I'm excited for you to have him on tonight. I'm excited to actually have him on as well to learn from him and his deep background of doing this for a very long time and being a scholar and the list can go on about who Steve A. Wiggins is. But yeah, so if you guys are listening, are tuned in right now live, and or you're listening to this on Spotify the day after, a couple days after, we do have an announcement at the end. So don't scroll ahead if you're on Spotify. Listen to the whole interview, but we do have a big announcement at the end of the show once Steve leaves us, and I hope you guys stay for it. As you know, Nine Gates podcast isn't 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 an hour. We are a long show, but if you stay on the ride with us, you're going to learn something. I definitely believe in that. So stick with us.
Yeah. All right. I don't
You
think
want
there's anything else except for I'm wearing my Exorcist shirt, of course, and you can't see it, but it's like that scene where the
Yeah.
tubular bells start and he's staring at the house, just so you know, because I wear themed shirts and I need you to know it. And he's wearing Ghost.
Yes, I'm wearing Ghost. And before I bring Steve on and talk about his bio, um, one thing I want to talk about with this topic tonight is demons in media. So if you haven't seen the flyer and you're just tuning in for some odd reason, maybe you just stumbled upon us, and I hope you did. We love more viewers and followers. But demons in media. So we will talk about movies, but we will also talk about traditional media. We talk about visual media, and I know in the technological age we are. So many things are accessible, so we'll definitely talk about that impact as well. But let me read his awesome bio. Steve A. Wiggins, PhD, is an author, former professor, editor, and prolific blogger who writes about the intersections of horror, religion, mythology, folklore, and popular culture. Dr. Wiggins received a doctoral degree in religious studies from the University of Edinburgh. He has been a teacher at several different institutions, such as Nashta House Episcopal Seminary, Rutgers University, and Montclair State University, while also establishing himself as a prominent figure in the field of academic publishing. As a result of this background and his lifelong interest in studying how ancient religious traditions have shaped modern storytelling, especially with the horror genre, Dr. Wiggins has authored numerous books such as Holy Horror, Nightmares with the Bible, The Wicker Man, and Sleepy Hollow as American Myth. In addition to his many publications, Dr. Wiggins is the founder of the well established blog Sex and Violence in the Ancient World, which include thought provoking entries that address issues related to religion, literature, film, history, and modern culture using what he terms dark academia as the framework. In describing himself as a I'm not even say that with my starting habit, who never tires of writing or of continuing his studies of the humanities, Dr. Wiggins continues to influence readers by making complex religious and cultural subjects both interesting, easily easily understood, and most importantly, relevant to today's audiences. Wow, that was a tongue twister, but let's bring him on.
Thanks,
Hello.
Steve.
Hey,
Thank you for the kind introduction.
well, it was stolen from your website, and I broke it because you do have an extensive bio. You have been in academia for a long time. You have dedicated yourself to your doctoral study and have a PhD, and so it, you have a lot about you. And hopefully from this, more people will buy your book and also follow you. But Victoria, I'm going to switch it over to you because I know you've been fangirling for weeks on end. So
Yeah. Well, why wouldn't I? I mean, yeah, Steve, like I said, he was so instrumental to my research, to the point that like literally every other citation is Steve Wiggins was. So I'm really happy you're here. And I am honored that you ended up reading my book because I didn't know you were going to do that. And of course, we didn't ask for you to do that. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, my pleasure. It's always good to see that you've had somebody's found your work and thinks you have something interesting to say about a topic. So, yeah, no, it's wonderful to read it.
yeah,
Awesome. I hope you liked it, but this is not the time for, well, of course you need to tell me all about it because I'm amazing. No. Really the whole point of me writing that book was to combat the feeling that demonic fantasy is taking over the paranormal. Um, that it's become a really big problem because I don't know how much you're on like paranormal, the paranormal side of like just the internet, like any like videos, if it's about ghosts, if it's about shadow people, anything like that, right? There is inevitably in the comments somebody who's like, no, that's just a demon and they're just fooling you. And it's just gotten to a point where I started to feel like something has to be done. This, like single time I went to a conference, I would have people like once they found out what I did and that I worked in demonic phenomena mostly, um, they were like, they would try to hold back their disgust a little bit. Like, I don't know, James, if you've ever had that happen, but like it's like an involuntary eye roll when you bring out the D word. And I'm like, no, I understand because it's something that's way overdone. Like ever since paranormal TV, people have been overdoing it and being like, oh my gosh, we found a demon. But demons are infinitesimal as far as I'm concerned, as far as James is concerned, and everybody that I've come into contact with in demonology.
yeah. So in that essence, though, following that, most people know of Victoria and I to a degree when it comes to the paranormal or even outside certain
Mostly James.
sectors.
I'm not famous yet.
But what got you interested in ancient religions? Because to me, somebody that is fascinated by it himself but doesn't have a doctorate or a bachelor's or master's, my master's program is in psychology, which does look at culture and all that fun stuff. But I wrote a book called The History of Demonology, not to plug it, but I'm fascinated about ancient religions. What made you take that step to want to go that route?
Yeah, very. Well, of course, your own life always is always interesting to you. But for me, the interesting story began because I was raised in a very religious household, not Roman Catholic, but the fundamentalist type of religion. So they were very hellfire and brimstone on Sunday type things. And so I grew up being very frightened of hell. I was trying very hard to avoid it. And even though I no longer believe in a literal hell, I'm still trying to avoid it as an adult. It's one of those things that never leaves you your entire life. And so I didn't really have any plans for a career, but we eventually started going to a church. There was a United Methodist church actually in a small town where I lived, and the minister realized that my career ambitions were. Well, there weren't any. I was going to be a janitor. That was my plan. I came from a long line of working class folks and didn't have a career in mind. And he said, "Well, you really should think about the possibility of going into ministry." And so I went to college and didn't know what to study, so I studied religion. And specifically, I ended up studying quite a lot of the New Testament. So that was my focus in college. And then if you're going into the ministry, the next step is you have to go to seminary. So I knew I'd have to take that step. And when I went to seminary, I thought, well, I want to find out how the New Testament got the way that it is, so I'll study the Old Testament, right? So you go back a step. I've always been very interested in origins. And so when it was time to start working on a doctorate, I thought, well, I'm going to take it back even further and look at what came before the Bible. Because as a student in seminary, I did realize for the first time in my life that there was pre-biblical literature, that things were written before the Bible. To my way of thinking, as a child, the Bible was the first book, that was ever
Mhm.
written. And so when I learned that there was more, I really wanted to learn about it. And so I went as far back as I could in my doctorate, working with the pre-biblical material, which of course influences the way the Bible looks at things like gods and demons. And
Mhm.
so that was the impetus, was to kind of get back as far as I could. And if I had endless amount of money and time, I would go back and do degrees into even older forms of religion I discovered as I went along. But the that was the interest that brought me into this in the first place.
Fascinating. Yeah. Because I had thought about it like prior to this, but not in depth like you had. And then the passages in your books where you were talking about like what was going on pre, during, and post biblical age were extremely fascinating to me. I knew about the ancient world, ancient spirit world, and how they viewed demons, but your work really painted a much broader picture about what was going on and made it a lot easier for me personally to understand exactly like how demons fit into everything, into the demon haunted world.
Mhm. Yeah, and the interesting thing I found as I was doing this, the reason I wrote that book, Nightmares with the Bible, was because I had started realizing that there wasn't anything out there for the average person, not necessarily a scholar, on how demons came to be recognized as what they are, or as
Mhm.
we recognize them today. And the of course, as always, when you start on a project like this, by the time you're done, somebody else has written a book similar to that.
Mhm.
So there, I found other people had the same idea. There was this lack of a book about demons, but I started looking into the ancient world and thought this really doesn't match our view at all, because the earliest view of demons, and interestingly enough, The Exorcist makes the point that this demon, Pazuzu, is this ancient Mesopotamian demon. The Mesopotamians didn't necessarily think of demons as evil. They were
Mhm.
bad because they could cause harm, but they weren't the embodiment of evil. That came about much later. And so their view of the world was what full of active entities that we would probably call elementals today,
Mhm.
things that you see as being part of nature, but as a supernatural part of nature. They believed that they were all over the place. And as the world view changed in the biblical world to one that was closer to monotheism, the idea that there's one deity. Um, And if that deity is good, then how do you account for evil? Well, you have to make some room for evil in that worldview. And over time, it eventually came to be represented by the devil. And the devil doesn't do all the work by himself. He's got helpers. And so those are demons. And so demons are, by definition, evil. And so our perception of demons really takes that biblical point of view rather than the more ancient point of view, which saw them as potential malign influences in life, but not necessarily evil.
Yeah,
Zoroastrianism, right? Really created that binary.
Yeah, Zoroastrianism was the real key there, because the Zoroastrians, that's a fascinating religion in itself, because it's the religion of ancient Persia, what is now Iran, and so it was right between the cultures where world religions were beginning. So it's in the middle between Israel, Syria, Egypt, where one set of cultures was developing the worldviews that would become Western religions. And at the same time, it was also in contact with the world of ancient India, which is where Eastern religions started to develop. And so both Eastern and Western religions owe quite a lot of their ultimate worldviews to Zoroastrianism, because it's right in the middle and very influential in both spheres. So it's really quite interesting.
Yeah, and I want to add to that, and it'll kind of follow up with the idea of media. When I think of interpretations like you're talking about, like Mesopotamia, the Akkadians, the oldest, once again, media, visual media. We know of this 700-year-old tablet from the Akkadians that showed the Bennu, which is now known as epilepsy. But their depiction of that, they made these depictions of certain characters. Pazuzu might have been bad, pestilence, but he also protected from kids from Lamashtu. So it was like it was a different time of interpreting. But you take that tablet and we have that interpretation. Okay, it's this Bennu. It's now known as epilepsy. But then we get to, I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong on this, my badge might be taken away from me, but where demons really got popularized in this Western format is probably, I believe, the Council of Constantinople, when they really did more decree on that. The Roman Catholic Church, or early church, I should say, more so. But what's fascinating to me is these interpretations, visual representation, because back then they didn't have video, they didn't have uh, photo cameras. They depicted through art, and right. So this transition from the Akkadian times or early Mesopotamia, um, with the Sumerians, and then you go into modern times. Really, that depiction hasn't changed too much, right? A lot of that early depiction of these bad spirits, now known as demons, in some essence, really have kind of followed through. That I believe the Bennu had horns with a lizard tongue on that depiction of the tablet, but it's interesting how it's transcended time. Like that has taken the footnote of our cultural identity in Western culture of course, demons. The Eastern cultures, they have similarities, but differences as well. The Rakashas and the Zoras, they had that internal battle of strife, right? This cosmic war going on, but it really, you see a lot of the influence of where we're in America now from a lot of these early interpretations that then kind of got molded throughout society. Would you agree on that?
Yeah, I think that the view of visual representation hasn't changed a whole lot. I mean, even in the more modern representations, you see the one that just came to mind, sorry, is from the television series Sleepy Hollow, where one of the episodes they have these demons are very fragile, actually. They break when certain things happen. But the image that they use is very similar to the ancient images. And it's interesting because I've read Mesopotamian specialists who say the real difference between what we would say is a monster, and there's no term for monster in the ancient world, but our difference between what we'd call a monster and a demon in ancient Mesopotamian art is that monsters walk on four legs and demons walk on two. But otherwise, they're very similar. They've got that kind of monstrosity of the mixed different types of creatures and that sort of thing. And that's what you typically find for the demons in their world. So, and then, of course, in the Middle Ages, they pick up a lot of those same ideas, the horns and the tongue and the
Mhm.
cloven hooves and things like that, which are really like animals or monsters walking upright.
So the Sin Eater thing came up in Sleepy Hollow, and I'd only ever seen that in another like Christian religious thriller called The Order from 2003. Have you ever seen that, Steve?
Yeah, yeah, I have. Yeah, so it's
I think it sounds
interesting.
scary, and that's why they used it for both types of media, because it sounds a lot more like frightening than what it was, which is, from whales, like people would absorb your sins through food, and you would get to go to heaven because somebody else ate your sins for you. And that's what it was, like a folk tradition and a folk belief.
Mhm.
But isn't it funny how it came up again in Sleepy Hollow? Because I remember like seeing that and being like, this is an interesting place for it to show up.
Yeah, yeah. I've often been surprised by how these older traditions keep on coming back,
Mhm.
and part of it, I think, is the way that media works. Is that they're always looking for material that maybe hasn't been overdone yet, and
Mhm.
they go back and do some reading on what ancient traditions were. Say, oh, we could use that.
Mhm.
But I think you're right, though, about the whole idea of demonic fantasy. Is that these get carried over into ideas about what's true
Mhm.
because people don't know how to go about finding the information that is more accurate for themselves.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree with that completely. And it's because I think what's going on, and this is introducing my third book, I'm going to be talking about Christian secrets and demonic or satanic secrets in film. I think really why demonic fantasy proliferates is because people are trying to keep themselves safe. They're trying to find ways to stop like evil spirits of any kind from coming into their life, but Christianity does not fill in those blanks. The Bible does not fill in those blanks. And I think because the ancient world already knew how to protect themselves, it was like common knowledge. So they didn't need to say it. It wasn't like written for us in a modern context. It was written for the people at the time who already knew this stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think, and that goes back to James's point about the visual representations as well, is that these people were not writing for people in the far future who would not
Mhm.
have a clue how their worldview worked. So we don't know what they thought about demons. They knew what they thought about demons. They knew what they were, and so they didn't have to explain them. And that's true of many different things in the ancient world. And it's one of the reasons that I've always been of the opinion that you can't take an ancient text and just apply it straightforward in a straightforward way to the modern world, simply because their context is so different.
Mm.
They had different points of reference, different ways of looking at things, and we don't
Mhm.
understand them. So we that's what specialists do. When you work on a doctorate, you try to understand the world and the context that these things come from. But our understanding is imperfect, so we can't say what exactly it was. But we do see that it influences what comes after it. But a lot of stuff gets left out in the meantime. So yeah, I think that's absolutely right.
So, Steve, one of the things that you touched upon is ministry, right? And you taught at a seminary. Is there outside of the media, because I'm always fascinated to hear what other people think, especially people smart like yourself, is do you believe that there is any sort of truth to any of all this stuff, or is it just the human need to have that kind of barrier, that theodical nature, theodicies, where there has to be a good versus evil kind of situation to keep our moral compass going forward and keep us ethical? Do you feel like that's the reason, or do you feel like there could be some truth to these interpretations throughout time?
I think there could be some truth to them. I think that we've been very quick to say that because science works, and it does. I mean, there's no question that the scientific method leads to verifiable results, and our lives have been improved by them, and all of that. But we've been too quick to say that's the only explanation for what goes on in the world. And I think that if you look closely at what all of us have experiences, I'm not saying they're demonic, but all of us have experiences that are difficult to explain. And we're taught just to say, "Oh, it's one of those things," or to overlook, "Oh, I must have forgot where I put this." So, even though I know I put it over there and it's over here now, that sort of thing. Um, we understand that these kinds of things happen, but we've been taught collectively just to dismiss it and to let it go, or even worse, to be told as children that these things can't happen, and therefore our minds accept what we tell them. I mean, we say it can't happen. Therefore, there are a lot of kids who grow up believing there's no possibility for anything outside of these strict walls, this box that we put ourselves into. I'd like to keep an open mind and say that there are possibility of things out there that we haven't explained yet. And the more that I pay attention to that sort of thing, the more I find that I think we really need to explore a little bit more seriously.
I'm looking at that myself, just because I grew up in a home where our experiences were taken very seriously because we're from a family of psychics. It runs matrilineally through my family. So we had our own built-in support group when something weird would happen, and we'd be like, "Hey, have you ever had that happen?" And my mom would be like, "Oh yeah," or "No, your grandma had that happen though," or and we all have abilities that are definitely extrasensory. Um, but in the process of folklore, from what I found, is that yeah, a lot of people are told that their folk beliefs are not correct, right? But it is funny how even like so I live out in Wyoming, right? And I do events out in the branches because I work at the library out here. And when I tell people what I do, the first thing is fear. They'll be like, demon folklorist, what does that mean? I'm like, well, I look at the stories that are told about demons. My wheelhouse is experiences, phenomena, and media. And they're like, oh, okay, well, what do you believe about them? And I'm like, I believe they're real. But I also grew up in a home where that was normal for it to be, for your experiences to be taken seriously. And in folklore, David Hufford really revolutionized how we looked at first person memories, so first person experiences, um, by looking at like senses and the experience itself and what it meant. Um, and he came up with the experiential source hypothesis, which is somebody has an experience and they they ask their culture about it to interpret it for them. And then the other side of that is cultural source hypothesis, where an experience happens, but you already are sort of feeding what you expect to happen because your culture told you so. So I found it interesting that there was this whole area of folklore that is phenomenological and looks at the body. So I absorbed that into my own work when I was classifying demons, and I've begun to classify other things like shadow people, Bigfoot, fairies. They're all different. And I think we should take those experiences very seriously because everybody's got one. And I can guarantee it. Even out here in Wyoming, it's very religious. People will tell me about their experiences with the afterlife sort of intruding on their present of people who are gone. And I'm like, oh, I see. So there's a lot of religious context for it. Yes, they believe they're in heaven, but for some reason they smelled mom's perfume today, or there was a penny from heaven, or what have you. And they knew instinctively that was their mother, their loved one who had passed on. So I do love that folklore has like a niche of that, but I'd love to see it more widely accepted that experience is important and it's how we
Yeah.
shape our beliefs.
Yeah, and you touch on this in your book as well. I think the big fear is that if we allow any of that, we're going to go back to witch hunts. That's everybody keeps on saying, "Oh, look at the witch hunts. That's what happened." But
Mhm.
those were very different circumstances too. I mean, they
Mhm.
it had its own historical context, and I think, have moved beyond that.
Mhm.
At least I hope we have. But at the same time, again, you don't want to throw out the baby with the bath because at this point, we're we're just beginning to understand that there could be more to the world than what science tells us is part of it, because science doesn't measure everything. As you know,
Mhm.
science deals with measurable phenomenon. What do you do when you get something that's not measurable, or something that doesn't work in a laboratory? There's just really no way to theorize it scientifically, but experientially, yes, we experience it, and I won't. I for one don't want to discount the experience of being human just because we can't theorize it
Mhm.
in a scientific way.
Yeah.
So on that note, do you, for how long you've been ingrained in this topic, and kind of looking through it at the lens that you do, is do you see certain points in history where there is a piece of media, visual, traditional, social media, uh, entertainment? Do you see certain points throughout history where there are certain movies or certain forms of interpretation that have impacted humanity with demons? I know that's a very open-ended question, but I'm assuming you have an answer for it.
Well, I'll muse on it. I think in the Middle Ages, definitely the stories of the saints were one such time, and you get these depictions of like Saint Anthony being tortured by demons, a very famous kind of picture from the Middle Ages. But I think that really the media that always comes to mind is The Exorcist. I think that
Mhm.
that movie, the book beforehand did quite well as well, but the movie I think really told us what demons are for the modern world. I mean, this is where our definition comes from. And yes, there were movies that had demons in them before, but there was something about The Exorcist that just changed everything. And I think that in a very real sense, any movie that deals with demons since The Exorcist is working off of it in some way or another. It was the one that opened the door to the topic. Because, I mean, the Catholic Church had always practiced exorcism. It had always been there. And as the movie portrays, it had become an embarrassment pretty much to the church because, psychology and modern scientific thinking don't really leave room for demons. But at the same time, um, the uh, the door was always open in the Catholic Church. It was there, but what you didn't get was Protestants doing exorcisms until after The Exorcist, and then all of a
Mhm.
sudden, it becomes the narrative that we tell ourselves. Oh, there's something wrong with Sally or whatever, and she doesn't know what it is. What is it? Well, it must be a demon. We'll get an exorcist to come in here. Uh, and to the point that it's used even in comedies all the time. Something unusual is happening. Oh, we got to call an exorcist, because they've become the explanatory form of the unexplained, the spiritually unexplained, and misfortune in the modern world. So I think that that really is the kind of it's the archway, it's the keystone. You need to think of it, The Exorcist as being that important. I think it probably is the most important horror movie that's ever been made, the most influential horror movie that's ever been
I
made.
agree.
And I think that it just has that much influence on culture and our media today as understanding of what demons are.
Mhm.
Yeah, what I find fascinating about that too is, you see a lot of these movies, especially nowadays, based on true story. Of course, they're
Mhm.
loosely maybe a percent based on the true story, but I think the fascination with The Exorcist too was that it was a quantified, based on true story, based upon the book, and that story can be interpreted many different ways. The person, I forget his real name all the time, but Roland Doe, Robbie,
From
lived
Huntworth.
lived a very extensive life, worked for NASA,
Mhm.
which is all true story. But I think what also interested people about that was it was a true story. It scared them, right? I know a lot of people in that time that walked away being scared from that movie. I still know people, even though it is much of a different movie with effects, it still has some impact to this day with people that watch it. And it really did was a pivotal point, and more people going towards the church for exorcisms. And yeah, like you said, you most for a long time before that they were doing it. There's been healers since Mesopotamian times. I believe they were called the Sipu, off the top of my head. But this idea of exercising or releasing somebody, um, of a demon has always been there. Even in Eastern cultures, they have the fervor dagger, which takes the energy and then they disperse it and then executes into the ethos. But it's fascinating how there have been pivotal points like The Exorcist that had made impacts, brought it to the forefront more than it was because, like you said, the Catholic Church. I know many Catholic priests. I'm good friends with one of them. He's probably my best friend. We get together once a week. He's quite well known for deliverance ministry work, but I hear stories from him where I've worked with other priests. I have a ministry background. I was pastoral assistant at the Church of Christ, and then became a minister that was focused on deliverance through them. And then I was ordained as a deacon in the old Catholic Church, and no longer associated. But I see that it's a part of it, but there's a lot of priests out there to this day, especially a lot of them that kind of stemmed from certain movements during the 70s, 80s, that they don't actually believe in demons in that sense, right? It is a psychological ailment, and they'll turn away from it. But the church is still heavily in it. There's a US issue right now with Exorcist. They're always looking, but it's also because people are jumping to that worst case scenario. Like Victoria said, they haven't that experience. How is that experience interpreted though in that essence, or in another way, scientific way or a psychological way? And I find it fascinating that the more from The Exorcist, it was steady and it kept coming. Now we have the largest horror franchise in history, The Conjuring, that of
Mhm.
course is based on Ed and Lorraine with some of their stories loosely. But and then you have things like Nefarious, which is probably one of my favorite movies. To me, as somebody that does this as an applied study, has in minute ways come across certain things to that degree. And
And
so
I don't even believe in perfect possession from
and
the research, but that movie does depict it.
but it's, there is certain movies that had made impact. And 1973 is a long time ago, right? So if I followed up on with media, the 2000s have become a different culture, right? It's night and day if you took the 70s to the 2000s, especially the 2010s or 2020s. It's dramatically, the generations have leaped so forward than they used to. But is there a movie nowadays or interpretation of demons that you think continues putting that finger on the pulse of bleeding that demon, the demonic narrative?
Yeah, I think so. I think there are multiple movies that could do that, and one of the reasons is, and this is an analogy that I use for in ancient studies as well, is that there are certain key points at which you simply can't go back to the level of influence that they had. So The Exorcist, for example, in the movies, for biblical archaeology, for example, there was a guy named William Foxwell Albright who was an archaeologist in around the turn of the century, early 20th century, and he was so influential that nobody today, and there are lots of archaeologists working in the biblical world, nobody can reach his level of fame simply because he was at that time the one that everybody knew. And The
Mhm.
Exorcist at that time is the one that everybody knew. And it doesn't mean that there aren't movies that kind of pick up the spirit of the times and move it into the modern world. There are, but they won't have the level of influence that the original had. That's the point I guess I'm making. Um, I mean, if I were to try to pick one, it'd be very hard because I mean I've see so many movies that have demons in them. It's very common to find them. Cheap B movies that you can stream for free, or other films that come along. I think the one that made the most impact for me after The Exorcist was The Exorcism of Emily Rose, which was, again, both of those movies have something in common. They take the emotional side very seriously,
Mhm.
and they are completely sincere in their approach to the issue of demonic possession and exorcism. Whereas when you get to movies like, say, The Last Exorcist, or The Last Exorcism. Which is it? The Last Exorcist or The Last Exorcism? I think
I've
it's
There's,
The
not
Last
seen
Exorcism.
it, so I don't remember.
there's also the Pope's Exorcist, which did Father Gabriel Morth very dirty.
Yes, yeah, that one I did not like that movie, but
Mm.
yeah, but with the last Exorcism, I'm going to call it that, even though it may be Exorcist. The idea is of course it's a Protestant doing deliverance ministry, but he doesn't believe in demons. He's just doing it for the money, and it's kind of set up like a mockumentary. So he's explaining to the people filming him that he's just doing it for the money and none of this is real. But of course, then he runs into a real demon, and so that's how that one ends. But there's a kind of a humorous element to that, even though it's again serious. But it's that kind of the oh, I'm not in this really because I believe in it, that sort of thing, brings an element of humor into the movie. Whereas the kind of sincerity that you get from some of the earlier movies, really, there are some in the modern constellation that have that, but I don't think that they quite pull it off the same way that they were able to in the 70s and the 90s, when I don't know, the internet's changed a lot. I think a lot of people they exposed to a lot more. They see a lot more examples. They see a lot more parodies. And it really disturbs me, again, showing my age here as an old person, but when people talk about seeing The Exorcist for laughs, they say, oh, it's so funny. It's not funny. It's not a funny movie, and I don't see how you could laugh about it. But I think it's probably because special effects have changed so much. And, we're so used to CGI, and now with AI, you can make just about anything look real. And so, yeah, they could go back and redo the special effects, but the movie had an emotional appeal that just has not been matched since then, that I can think of. Although one of the ones you mentioned, James, just now, and I've forgotten off the top of my head, that you were just talking about, was another one that was very good at doing that.
What, Nefarious?
Was after
Or
that.
Exorcist, maybe.
No, it was terrible.
I
Oh,
didn't end up
yeah.
seeing it, so I can't comment.
I said Nefarious, Pope's Exorcist, The Conjuring
Oh, The
movie.
Pope's Exorcist. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
the one. I think it tried very hard to do that,
Yeah.
but I don't think it managed to pull it off.
So I would
Not.
disagree actually with not that the Exorcism of Emily Rose was not influential. I think it absolutely was, and there was that emotional core. I actually think The Conjuring has overtaken that
Oh, yeah.
mantle into the 2010s, because it started 2013. That's when it first started, and it was the first movie was the most accurate. There were some things that were a little bit off, but something from that movie, because I had seen it, showed up in my own possession. But I never found it again in other people's experiences. Now, mine wasn't a demon, but for all we know, and this is like a big, like, maybe, but maybe demons or I believe it was a jinn that possessed me. Maybe they know about these movies. Maybe they somehow heard about it. I don't know if it's possible for a demon to watch TV or to watch a movie, but they seem to know, because that part where Carolyn has bruises all up and down her arms, that happened to me. They showed up out of nowhere. I started having nightmares and throwing up food, and some of it was just an anxiety disorder that hadn't been dealt with yet. But a lot of it wasn't, and things that happened to me happened to my family as well, supernatural things. And that one was the weirdest. I wish I had kept the photo of me, because I did end up going to a mental institution, because of course that's what you would think it was, wouldn't you, in a modern context? And people are allowed to believe what they want, and I don't personally care if people believe that I was ever possessed. I know that I was. My mom knows that I was. My family was there and they saw this. But there was a photo of me. I was ridiculously thin because I lost a ton of weight during this, and I had these like lurid bruises. It looked like I'd been brutalized just up and down my arms. But I think The Conjuring, what they do really well also is the concept of the family breakdown, which is the emotional core of The Exorcist. Because what scares me about that movie has nothing to do with the demon. The makeup is still, I think, amazing. I think they did such a good job. And yeah, like, it was so shocking, and that's why people find it funny in the context of today. of the things this little girl was saying and doing in the movie that you just don't expect from little girls, right? And it was very scary though for me because I was watching her mother, and what would it be like to watch your child die in front of you because of this thing you cannot see and you cannot fight, at least not without help from the clergy. So, I mean, I don't have children. I have a cat named Salem, and that's it. But James has children. I can't imagine it would be easy to watch any of your kiddos go through this and almost literally die in front of you. So that to me was the emotional core. But it's the same thing in the Conjuring movies. Every single time there is a family, there is a breakdown, a breach, a violation, and we're trying to save usually a child or somebody who's central to the family unit, which is what I think The Exorcist was about.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think The Conjuring is the mantle, if it's been passed, has been passed to that. I mean, as James said, it's the most successful horror franchise ever. And as much as I think some of the movies could really have done a bit more homework,
They
quite a
could
bit
have
of
hired
homework.
me.
Yeah, they could have. They've gotten some better advice that way. But the movies do kind of focus on the family, and usually with one of the younger girls in the family is the one that's at threat, and that again, The Exorcist got that right. And if you look at I think again, it's the emotional resonance that we have for other people and people with families. But a lot of times, there's always this kind of idea that boys can take care of themselves and girls need help. I know that's a very sexist way
Archaic.
of looking at things and archaic,
Yeah.
yes. But there is something kind of very primal about that. And I think that filmmakers have realized that because there's one of the Exorcist movies, I think it's one of the prequels, where they have a boy who's possessed, and it just doesn't have the same emotional resonance. Now that could be because the movie just wasn't as well made, but there's also kind of the sense of, oh, he'll get over it. At least I felt that when I was watching it. Whereas when you've got in the second Conjuring movie, the young girl who's being tormented by the Enfield poltergeist, and throughout, and I think so The Devil Made Me Do It, where Arnie is the boy is possessed again. It just didn't quite have the same emotional gravitas that some of the earlier ones in the series did. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the series winds up if it ever does. I don't know if the final rights or the last rights or whatever the last one was is really going to be the final one or not.
I saw it, and
There's a prequel coming out. They announced it. It's
Yeah,
when they were younger. Yeah,
there's lots of spin-offs in the works because they noticed that series makes a ton of money. It is usually the highest grossing demon-related movie of the year, no matter what part of the series it is. I found that in the Annabelle series, like The Nun, all their spin-offs. So no, I think that's definitely like spot on. But something though that was interesting in The Devil Made Me Do It that gave it that emotional resonance back was that it was a young child, David Glassell, and it's played, I can't remember his name, but he is adorable. And like, you literally want to reach out and hug him and protect him from this. And that is essentially what Arn does. Or is it Arnie?
I don't
only
know.
ever read
I can't remember.
It's his name's Arnie Johnson. Yeah.
Okay, Arnie. But yeah, I think that his desire to protect the boy and to say, hey, you come into me instead, you pick on me instead. It also goes back to, Father Karras and Regan being like, hey, you come into me, you pick on me, stay away from the girl. But yes, I do think there is that weird sexist, archaic, misogynistic idea of like, oh, well, women need to be saved. And I'm like, I didn't need to be saved. Like when this happened to me, like something I personally believe that my will regained. And also I do happen to believe in God, but I'm not necessarily Christian. I'm too open-minded for that. That God also pushed it out for me. And I woke up and I had a cigarette in my hand and I don't smoke and I didn't have my glasses on and I can't see without them. In a mental institution, I didn't even know where I was. Like 3 days of my life were gone. and they've never been recovered, and I don't think I'll ever get them back, but I didn't need to be saved. I needed my will to come back so that I could fight it off, and it never came back. People have asked me that, and I'm like, no, it never came back. I think it cannot get back through the ways that it tried, which was through my stress levels, and I had a bunch of multiple heartbreaks. I'm going to send you my first book so that you can read about it, but it wasn't, I don't think it can reach me the same way again. And I also have all this occult and esoteric knowledge from doing this work. There's no way it can reach me, at least not that way. So, you know.
Um, So speaking about entryways and media, one, I'm wearing a ghost shirt. I don't know if you don't know who that is, Steve, but it's a satanic band. On Essence, like old Ozzy was with Black Sabbath and some of the bands. Mayhem. You had Mayhem, which actually were real Satanist. But with music and the Satanic Panic, talking about almost the kind of the same um, era somewhat. Do you feel like that when people see these things or get enamored with it, like, I got into demonology because I found the idea of evil spirits fascinating. I have a very similar upbringing to you in the sense where I didn't believe, was forced into religion, and really kind of opened a pathway to many questions and then eventually finding a faith. But do you feel like when these things come out that people are starting to gravitate more towards the negative, also in essence, like, and I don't necessarily believe in this, but I'm going to get your opinion on it. Do you feel like some of these context in audio or visual create more mayhem in life, more evil deeds? Do you feel like that is a commonality in human history, or even more so present time?
I don't think that people get the ideas from the movies. I think that really what I'm finding is that, and I hope that I'm not the only one, that it's kind of therapeutic to see these kinds of presentations because they help you understand or give you a context for dealing with the things that could go wrong or have gone wrong in your own life. So the sense that they're causing people to act out, I don't think is necessarily the case. I think people are uh, capable of doing some pretty nasty things on their own, and that there are always going to be some copycats, yes, but I don't think the vast majority of people take inspiration from these sorts of things. And even people like Ozzy Osbourne, I mean, he was putting on a show, and Alice Cooper, the whole bunch of them, they're putting on a show, and they know that people are interested in this. And even Anton LaVey, when he started the Church of Satan, he doesn't believe in a literal Satan. He never did.
Hmm.
It was not what they were trying to do. And so these kinds of ideas are easily taken over in, well, you might call it satanic fantasy, as like the demonic fantasy, and into these satanic panics that occur, and they have I think, a certain explanatory quality to them that people really uh, find comforting, or at least they fill a gap in their understanding of the world and the way that it
Mhm.
is, and they become quite far flung. I mean, when the Satanic Panic really hit in the '90s, I was living in Scotland at the time, and for I remember seeing in the news there that the Orkney Islands, which is a very small community of people on a set of islands north of Scotland, had an outbreak of satanic panic, and they started accusing school teachers and other people of being Satanists. It was absolutely ridiculous, but it was very firmly believed at the time because it had kind of an explanatory value for the the anxiety that we're all feeling because of various things that are happening. In the '90s, of course, communism was breaking down, the world order was changing, a lot of uncertainty about things then, and it's only gotten worse. So I'm not surprised that the demons keep on showing up because they really help people to understand or to deal with issues that we see in everyday life, even if they're not literally demonic.
Hmm.
I know, and people will make associations between things that don't even make sense.
Yeah.
Like you saw in my book, the Labubu is Satan thing.
Hmm.
People totally believe that those little tiny stuffies that look a little evil, but that's kind of the point of them, and you can customize them. Um, that those are actually Pazuzu, and it's literally because they sound similar. And I'm like,
Mm.
you guys are really reaching here. Like, where did you get this? And then they're performing what they view as a Christian rite, which actually more closely resembles witchcraft, and occult ritual to expel the demon from these little stuffies. And I documented this in the book because I was like, what is happening? Why are you guys losing your minds over here? And I think it's because their religious culture tells them to fear such things, to try and usually curb some kind of behavior. Like maybe they don't want you to buy as much of this. Maybe they want you to give more to the church, what have you. But their pastors watch the same movies
Hmm.
as us. So they end up like trickling down. And then it ends up on the internet because they heard it in church telling them that Labubus are evil. And I'm like, but they're not, though. It's
Mm.
it's a stuffy. I don't understand.
Yeah.
So that's where some of this came from, that I was looking at that because I was like, what the hell?
Yeah,
And
I
the
know.
mandate is going on.
Yeah, and I
Mhm.
think people had an issue too, which is, of course, like kind of cements your idea of intrusions on your belief, because the illustrator of Labubu actually said that what inspired him for that was Nordic folklore, right?
Oh, interesting.
Elves, fairies, and Ymir and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
I think also people had problems with that, because there's, even though it's folklore mythology, it's like it's still like, with neo-paganism being a huge thing nowadays. I think that when people like factor one thing and then there's that battle, we see religions bat heads throughout many centuries, right? We see it today. It happened a lot more in the past, but I think sometimes that unknown, like this tactic, like I know people that won't watch Harry Potter or watch Lord of the Rings because there's magic or there's these folklorish creatures in there, and that goes against their identity, their cultural tradition, right? And
Mhm.
it's interesting. But it's interesting that even though you might not have a belief, uh, demons transcend beliefs, right? Psychology has many papers on the idea of demonic possession, and they're very interesting scholarly articles. And it breeds into other sects of life that maybe you never would have thought that it had something to do with that. But I think it's um, such a large phenomena that it transcends our cultures and has been passed down through many different belief systems within certain ideologies, that it impacts us today, and then it also makes people do heinous things, or uh m- and come to bat over a labubu being demonic. But I think that's also, I always say it's a double-edged sword, right? Because if in essence, right, and I think this is where the demonic media or demonic fantasy or demonic whatever, a lot of these people that are very strict and as I call sometimes extremist, don't fascinate those things. They don't lead towards that. So and then they, maybe there is peace in their life eternally, right, from start to finish, because they're not injecting these negative innuendos in their life, and it's impacting them, and they're experiencing that. Like sometimes I like always would wonder how it would be to be Amish, right, or be close from the world and grow from a trickle from a certain family or certain unit without having that outside influence impact you. I find it wicked fascinating with in the sense of the Lububu comment, Labubu statement. But I feel like, yeah, the media has impacted us, and it generalizes our culture nowadays to believe in certain things, even though it might go against your actual faith, which is fascinating how we are able to be manipulated like that into a degree.
I
Yeah,
have
and
a comment about that before you get into it, Steve. Sorry. That's
mhm.
actually what my next book's about. I think religion has become folkloric. And the way that media retells stories, that has become the new religion. But yeah.
No,
Super.
that's very very perceptive, and I think that one of the things I was going to point out, a couple of different aspects of this, is that the idea of using somebody else's religion as a source for demons is a very old idea,
Mhm.
and early on, one of the origins of demons is that the gods of other nations. So you were mentioning Nordic gods, since they're not Christian, they must be demonic, that sort of thing. That's been done from the very beginning, when demons became a bad thing, was to say that they are just some other people's gods. But at the same time, there's also the element of cooperation between religions when it comes to demons. And one of the things I found fascinating in researching nightmares of the Bible was that in in the Middle Ages, it was not unusual if somebody lived in a city which was multicultural at the time, with Jews and Christians and Muslims all living in the same city, that if somebody needed an exorcist and a Christian exorcist wasn't available, you could use a Muslim exorcist or a Jewish exorcist. It didn't matter what the belief system was. The idea was the exorcist knows how to deal with demons, and therefore you can use anybody's exorcist you need. Whereas once we get to The Exorcist, and this I think has become the culture since then, it is the Catholics. They know how to deal with demons. They're the ones you're going to call, because they'll take care of the problem. It's become a very different world.
Yeah, I want to add to that too. I think there's a reason for that to some degree. Many denominations of Christianity, and then of course many ever other religions and belief systems. If you really look at a microscope nowadays, we do have religious leaders in a lot of these different belief systems that do combat our healers. But the thing is with the Catholics, right? Where I think where people lean on them, especially Roman Catholic priests, is they most of them have to, not most of them, all of them have to go through schooling, seminary,
Mhm.
which it takes up to 10 years of your time. And then on top of it, if you get involved in the realm of demonology and exorcisms, that you're chosen for that by your bishop. You also have to go to follow up classes, at the Vatican, or if you're in the United States, it's in Philadelphia. Adam Bly is actually the teacher of that, and he's a laity. So I feel like in some scope, and I'm Catholic, so I'm not trying to be biased, but trying to look at the envelope of institution. I think that their focus on it they have the most training, right? They focus on, even though there is a clear disparity between belief of demons and not belief of demons, they really attempt to put that institution behind it. And that's why a lot of Roman Catholic priests will say, I'm not the one doing exorcism. It's the church is behind me and the saints and all this. And I'm not saying that the Catholics are better than the Protestants or they're better than the monks in Tibet, but I feel like in some essence, especially in Western culture, they're the ones that get the most institutional training from it and insight from it, and spend a lot of time. If I want to become a minister and open my own church, I can go on Universal Life Church, get my ministry license, and then open up a church, right? I'm not dedicating 10 years of time of dedication of being formed and learning. So I feel like that what is in some way why they are the pinnacle when it comes to demonic possession or even demonic or evil spirits, is because they have that focus. And I'm not saying other people do not, because I know Protestants and that go to seminary that they have exorcists, or Anglicans, but there is such a large more focus on the church, Catholic Church, and a lot of this has to do with the exorcist and it being permeated within that culture, and people leaning towards them. But they really, as like I said, since like 357 um, AD with the Council of Constantinople, this has been their focal point, right? This is something they've discussed, had councils on. You had people like Saint Thomas or Thomas Aquinas write about it with scholasticism and do deep dives like the Summa. So I feel like that they're known for it, but they also have the institution behind it, while other belief systems or denominations do not. And I don't know if that's a fair assessment, being biased, but that's through my own research and through my own ministry work and being eclectic in self, because I do like esoteric knowledge and learning why other people do certain things. But that's what I've come to find out. Like if I am a neo-pagan, you have little circles, you have convents, and they do focus on that. But those convents are 15, 20, 30, couple thousand people, while the Roman Catholic Church is 2.2 billion strong, right? It's an
Mhm.
interesting thing. It's like the number play as well, but that institution that's behind it.
Yeah, and also another aspect of the numbers, and this ties into something that Victoria talks about in her book, is that the Catholics tend to think of demonic possession as being rare,
Hmm.
except with the exception of people like Amorth, who Gabriel Amorth, who thought demons were everywhere. In Catholic churches, they want you to go through all these various tests to make sure it's not something else.
Hmm.
Whereas with a lot of Protestant, especially the more conservative Protestant groups, they see demons everywhere. I
Hmm.
mean,
Mhm.
anything can be demonic, and they really, I think there's a certain appeal, psychological appeal, if nothing else, to having a sense that we understand demons and we don't see them everywhere. We're not seeing them under every
Hmm.
rock or around every corner. But when there's a real one, we know how to deal with it.
Hmm.
Whereas, instead of saying, okay, this is all demonic, everything's demonic, and I can handle it because I know how to
Hmm.
handle demons, that makes a very different way of putting it. As a matter of fact, a friend of mine, when I was in seminary, said, came to visit me and said, I just saw this thing about, it was one of those televangelists, I can't remember which one, maybe Jim Baker or something, where, if he raised a certain amount of money, he would go down a water slide at one of his parks in a three-piece suit. She said, "You'd never see the Pope doing that." I said, "Yeah, exactly. That's the difference. We're talking about a gravitas, a seriousness that is lacking when you start finding demons everywhere and try to just throw them out because you know how to
Yeah.
do it."
Yeah, and you make a good point, and I'll give it back to Victoria about the church. There is a process, right? Nowadays, especially since probably the 70s, maybe 60s, where they started implementing a lot of the steps from the Enlightenment era, of course, with the Catholic Church, but more breeds into our modern times, is that if somebody's claiming that they're possessed, they have to get a psychological assessment. They have to have their physician write off and do a physical on them. These are protocols that are required before they jump to it. And of course, there's historical data that shows that when doesn't happen, it leads to deaths. You talk about exorcism of Emily Rose. The true story of that, loosely once again, is Annalise McCall. And she died, so there is a lot of precautions. But like being applied demonologist, like I'm an analytical thinker, critical thinker, and I really don't jump to that conclusion. So I work with a lot of people on a daily basis. I consult on cases with other teams, with other demonologists, with clergy members. And, I always say, and I say on these programs, that if somebody's coming to me and saying they're demonically possessed, the first thing I do is say, well, I need a psychological evaluation. It's not that I don't believe you, but we have to see what everything is else is at play, because it could be that and it could be this, but I don't tell them that. But I'd say, hey, I need a psychological assessment. If you especially if you're seeing a psychiatrist or a therapist at this moment in time, and how many people actually, once you say that, and they could think maybe I'm thinking they're crazy, but a lot of people then will stop talking to me and then go to the next person that will actually feed their story, their experiences, which they could probably truly have experiences, but they feed that more so than maybe myself, who will look at all the natural explanations to rule those out before I jump to the preternatural, because like we've all said, we have these experiences, but in this essence, it is rare, or like Victoria says, infinitesimal. And so that's a fascinating thing, and I love how you gave your take on it, where some people jump to it. I know people that will get touched and they will start dancing the demon out of them, and it's like it's interesting how that culture has become so intertwined with that aspect where I feel like we're back in Mesopotamia, where every ailment is a demon, and some cultures do still believe in that.
It's that like Zoroastrianism binary coming back, because demons and or like witches, Satan, whichever way that you focus on it is as old as America itself, actually older. And in my book, I said it's as American as apple pie. That's a quote from Dustin Crowley, who is a demonologist. But it's actually like, if you think about where apple pie comes from and where Americans come from, it's actually British, right? Both of those things. And that's where it all sort of came from in our own history. But it is that old. It is so old that like people have for millennia been like, oh, it's that witch over there because she's kind of weird. She's old and what have you, that people picked out the town weirdo and decided they were the problem. And I feel like we're seeing that binary come back, especially in very like fundamentalist, charismatic Christian communities where they're like, well, everything that's not of God is automatically a demon, that there is no middle ground. But folklore tells us there's quite a bit of middle ground. There's a lot of neutral entities. I think what's going on is that they want to live in the light. That's all they want to do. But my own story tells us that we can't live in the light and expect to not be bothered by the dark. I did live in the light. I was fully Christian, purist Christian, more like Protestant. But like I didn't touch what they said not to touch. I didn't do what they said not to do. I wasn't living with sin or whatever it is they tell people who become possessed. I was attacked anyway. Like it didn't save me from this. So I look at it like, oh, well, I understand you want to live in the light, but the dark can encroach on you anyway. So maybe we need to be looking at this more critically instead of, oh my gosh, that made me religiously uncomfortable. It's demonic, because people are actually using the word incorrectly now. They just are like there was a whole chapter that was like, oh, Wendy's Gothic logos on bags because they were doing a Wednesday season 2 premiere promo. And a lady got on there and was like, this is demonic. I am throwing this right out. And it's like, actually, darling, I know you don't know much about this, because that stuff is related to your own Christianity historically. That imagery is associated with Christianity.
Yeah.
She doesn't know that. It makes her uncomfortable. So now she's like, it's demonic. And a lot of people are doing that with like random objects, and it's weird.
Mm. Yeah, in that essence, Steve, to give you so one of the things I brought up in your bio, and something that you've talked about, of course, have a YouTube video on, and nightmares with the Bible, is dark academia. Can you give us a little bit insight of dark academia? Like, what's the essence of that? Does that revolve around this topic? What is it about?
Well, in my understanding, and this is again just an opinion, and I always tell people check other opinions, but it basically is the recognition that when we get people together in an educational setting, things tend to go wrong. And a lot of times we tend to, and I think of education as a positive. I mean, I would be still teaching if I had the opportunity. So it's something I really value very much. But I also realize that there's always been a dark element to it, and to me, it just makes a lot of sense of the world that we live in, because people are involved. Education is a human activity, and it's going to involve people with issues and problems, and they're going to bring that with them, and it's going to affect the way that that they live in an educational community. As far as demons go, there have been actually there's a lot of dark academia fiction, of course, these days, and there's some of them that involve demonic characters. But I'd say for the most part, it's just a reflection more of the human element of darkness as part of our makeup. We're not beings of light. We don't live in the light all the time. There is darkness involved with being human,
Yeah.
and this just explores the educational aspect of it.
Yeah, in one of your videos, you brought up Harry Potter. It's a good context, right? I talked about theodicies earlier. Epicurus, but there always needs to seem to be that good versus evil, right? That like, I'm a big Star Wars guy. If I took the green screen down right now, you'd see Star Wars posters everywhere. But there's that need for that good versus evil, right? There's that
Mhm.
battle that needs to be at hand, and Harry Potter has that as well. And it seems to be able to build into anything because we can all relate to that, even though like we're not beings of light, but we feel that need to latch on to that.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's really where it comes in because I mean, like Harry Potter is a good example for many different reasons, but the there's a school to learn witchcraft, and of course, many conservative Christians don't like that because of the witchcraft aspect. But what's Harry doing? I mean, he and his friends are fighting for good as opposed to evil. Voldemort and his cohort.
Mhm.
There's there's good and evil there, and they're throwing the whole thing out, saying, "Oh, there's no message that we can learn from that because it's demonic. It's got witches and magic in it." I think that's overstating the case dramatically because they're missing the message because of a fear of well, it's an othering. We keep on othering, and as long as we do that, we're going to unfortunately make use of demonizing literally or figuratively other people who don't see things like we do. So I think education is really the key to that, is to teach people that this is not the way that we make the world a better place is by demonizing others, but trying to understand them and seeing that there may be evil out there, but it's not, you know, the Harry Potter fans.
It just makes more fear. Like people, when you other a group, all you do is begin to become more and more afraid of it, and you other them some more, and it keeps going. It's a cycle. We recently, so I work at a library, and we did a Harry Potter event because it's Harry Potter's birthday on July 31st, and it's a very popular event, very well attended. I like to be scheduled for it because it's a lot of fun to see the kiddos in their costumes, and I dress up every year. This year I was Professor Trelawney, and yeah, like it was very fun. But there was a woman who came in like a day or two before because she'd heard about it and was like, how can you sit here and promote this when it's all about witchcraft and it's against God? And my coworkers, I didn't even have to step in. I wasn't there when this happened. Um, but they were like, no, it's about the story. We are promoting the story in the book, not the witchcraft element of it, because the way it was set up, it was like Quidditch, where you were pretending to play like Quidditch on brooms and like taking pictures as if you were in the Great Hall. It was a celebration of the story, and not even of the creator, just the story, because she's controversial right now. Because we, I grew up with Harry Potter, and my mom was Christian, still is, but she didn't look at that story because she read it first before I was able to read it and was like, you know what? This is a story about good versus evil. And she noticed that immediately because she read it. And something that I take from your work very heavily is the idea that our society is profoundly biblically aware. Like we know all the Bible stories, or at least most of them, and what they say and about what they're about, but not many people have actually read it. We're biblically illiterate in our society. And also we have like functional illiteracy problems. So people can read, but they don't understand what they're reading. So even if they do read it, they're not getting it. And you kind of have to have a background in like biblical studies and ancient cultures and sociology and all of these different things just to understand anything about demons. So I think already society and our culture is at a distinct disadvantage to understand what, say, me, you, and James understand, and our past guests too. Like, it takes time, it takes education, it takes really looking into it for yourself, but also knowing how to research, which most people don't know how to do either.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right about the Bible. I mean, it is so basically foundational to everything in the United States, everything, and yet people don't read it. And as you say, they can, but they don't. It's a big book. It takes a long time. A lot of it's hard to understand,
It's
um,
confusing.
and so people just don't. They're aware of it. They're told by their ministers, who many of them haven't read it themselves,
Mhm.
what how they should understand it or how they should believe. It's really a recipe for disaster. It really is.
Yeah, and I find the fascinating thing about the Bible too, during the Protestant Reformation, is that it really actually gave more people the ability to be vernacular in language. Right, it made it accessible to broader audiences. A lot of people uh, weren't into literacy in some form or fashion, right? And it promoted that, and it also promoted educational reinforcement in society, and reading the Bible became priority, so it made you value reading and that education from it. So that's a huge impact too that we see that translates to now, right? The Bible was literally uh, a, a book that made a lot of people want to engage and read and promote that literacy. So I think that has an impact today too, because there's really been no other religious tome that we know in modern times, in the past thousand years, that has impacted society as much as the Bible has, right? Regarding that literacy and that promotion of this good versus evil.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even the whole idea behind public schooling, originally in this country, was so that people could learn to read, so they could read the Bible. That was, if you went to people's homes in the 1800s and tried to find out what books they had, if anybody had a book, it was going to be the Bible.
Right.
And so that's what, when you were learning to read, that's what you were learning to read.
Hmm.
It was very much an important part, and it does have good elements to it. I'm not saying it's bad, but it's just really has to be taken in context, and that's where we really fall down on the job.
Yeah.
I have a
Uh,
question
yeah.
about
Go ahead.
biblical, uh, like, okay, before it was printed and more mass produced, how did people absorb the Bible? Like, was it told to them at, say, mass or church, or was it sort of enacted, like acted out, like the mythology of like Greek mythology and that sort of thing? Like, how did people get their information prior to the press?
Yeah, I think a lot of it did come through their experience of church, either like through stained glass windows that show scenes from the Bible,
Mhm.
sermons, even hymns. There are various things that the church does. And a lot of what the church does is based on the Bible. Um, so before people read it, they got the information mediated through the church. And of course, that's what the whole Protestant Revolution really came down to, was people wanted to read the Bible and interpret it on their own.
Right.
Which, it's maybe a good thing in some ways, but it does open a whole can of worms,
Mm.
because you don't have to be trained, you just have to read it. And that's
Mhm.
the situation we find ourselves in today, is that people can read it because it's freely available all over the place.
Mhm.
And but they have no training. They don't understand
Yeah.
how to interpret.
So I have a out of the, like, the ordinary question here, but while we're on the topic of the Bible, one of the things I find interesting about the Bible, you taught the New Testament, and both both testaments have pretty dark history involved with both tomes, and but what I find interesting is the cultural influences too, right? The Old Testament originally being Hebrew, and then the New Testament primarily being kind of developed from the Greek language in essence. And you can see a lot of that influence between both books of how it was interpreted or written or transcribed, whatever, and how it was compiled. Out of both testaments, what is your favorite?
That's a trick question. Um, I think that my sense of it was that the if I'm looking for something to give a sense of comfort in a troubled world, it can be either one. I mean, it really can. So I'd have to say, like the Sermon on the Mount, for example, in the New Testament, one of the most wonderful pieces of rhetoric ever, as far as I'm concerned. A lot of really good things there, but at the same time, there are times when I'd rather read the book of Ecclesiastes and say, okay, that's where the real wisdom is.
Mhm.
And so there are elements in both that really kind of still speak to me, even though I no longer uh, consider myself, what would you say? I want to use this word guardedly, but this phrase guardedly, but Bible believing, because that itself has come to have a certain meaning. I look at the Bible as being a great source of inspiration and a source of a lot of good in society, but also a source of a lot of evil
Mm,
because of the way it's misused. And there's elements in it that are very difficult to explain, other than they're very dark and don't show God in a very good light either.
Mhm.
So depending on how you're reading or what parts you're reading. So I'd say that as a whole, there's good to be found throughout it. And we need to, if you look at it in context, I think it all does sort of make sense
Mhm.
in context. And I think that's the important part, is to try to get the context.
Mhm.
good answer.
No, that makes sense because I believe the exact same thing. Like, I don't think I take the Bible very literally anymore. I did obviously when I was, um, when I identified as Christian, but
Mm,
now I see it as an important historical, cultural document. And yeah, it does make sense when you know the context of the ways that Israel being invaded and like all sorts of other things that were happening historically
mhm,
at the time, like enacted on
mm,
it, and the way that their only scribes could really read and write at a certain period in time.
mhm,
Like these people, which are people, were sort of changing the way that Christianity was viewed in several different shifting times. So there's a lot of power in that. And, Christianity has a horrifically bloody history of becoming now the dominant um, religion. And I'm looking at that now and how there's a lot of strangely persecution fantasies about Christians right now believing that they're, especially online, that they are going to be persecuted for their beliefs. But I'm like, you guys are the dominant religion. What are you guys talking about? I mean, marginalized groups are still being attacked. Witches end up having their shops destroyed. They get attacked all the time. Some of it violently and becomes physical instead of just online. All of this has an effect. And um, there's just a lot of like, they seem to believe that it's going to be taken from them, but I don't understand why they believe that.
I think, and Steve can back me up on this as the guy that taught this stuff at a university. Is I think in some essence we look at the historical pieces or the dynamics of the Bible, and we can see that this happened to the Jews, right? And then
Right.
and especially in the Old Testament, and Steve kind of alluded to it a little bit, is that there was shifts of other gods becoming demonized, and this is loosely talked about in context or translation in the Old Testament, where invading neighbor countries were demonized, and maybe they came on board and became a monotheistic belief system. But I also think why that has impact on the Christian mindset right now, because what we've seen through history is every uh, major belief or major country or major empire has fallen due to a minority group or to a smaller country, right? I preface to, and I love Eastern tradition so much. If you saw my body, Steve, I am littered with Japanese tattoos, but which is weird that I'm not like a Shinto follower than a Christian. But but I look at like the Mongolian Empire, that was the most expensive empire to exist, and how they integrated different cultures. But they were such a small nation that took over large parts of China, or most of China, and then even tried to steam into Japan, where things didn't go quite well for them. But they was such a small force that impacted the major world. So that thought of historical mindset is that even though you are so large, you can still fall. And you see points of this in the Old Testament with David and Goliath, right? Where you might be large, but the smaller guy might still take you down. And we have this mindset. But also, traditionally, a lot of the Bible also has shaped a lot of our current Western ideas of morals and ethics, right? You look at the battle with a lot of what was said in Leviticus, right? Some things that nowadays don't fit in the modern realm, but you also look at a lot of things in the Ten Commandments that still can follow to this day. So there's that kind of mixture of all these realities coming into play with minority mindset, or how we value um, our ethics and morals, and how the times are changing, and a lot of these ideas and these morals and ethics that were taught to us through biblical scripture are being changed dramatically, because the world is changing at a dramatic uh, footnote, in the sense of uh, yesterday was way different than today, and especially in the past 10 years. Steve, do you agree on that, as somebody that has studied religion and kind of culture throughout time?
Yeah, I think that's part of it, and I think that people are afraid. I think that's really true, and I think if you were to step back and try to think about it from their point of view, put on their glasses and look at it through their lenses, they do believe that demonic forces are out there
Mhm.
and that they are fighting them constantly. And even though they're in the position of dominance, they are under threat. And that has been
Fair.
so much a part of their culture for so long that I have to believe that they sincerely believe it. Um,
So, based
so
on my own Christian religious culture, that does make sense. It is hard sometimes to step back and go back to that mindset because I've grown since then. I don't view the world that way, even having had a possession experience. But no, I think you're right. They absolutely do believe it's happening. And a lot of it, some of it, I think, is related to like the marginalized fears of other religious communities like paganism, Satanism, which they haven't looked at in depth for themselves to understand the tenets of. They're just told it's evil. They're all evil. And that witches, for instance, they're a very common scapegoat, that witches are doing spells on us, and that's why this stuff is happening. And it's like, no, most of the time, witches are doing spells to help their own lives. It's a form of, you know, folk belief around the occult. It's not usually um, based on hurting other people at all. But I think they're told that good versus evil binary. I think it all comes back to that from Zoroastrianism and the way that it got carried through, that it's you're either good or you are evil and there is no in between. Um, and I think that's very dangerous.
yeah, and it's also selective reading of the Bible because there's
Yeah.
a verse that says that witches shouldn't you shouldn't let
Is this
witches
a
live, and
mistranslation though? Or a
uh,
retranslation?
it's hard to say what exactly it means because the word is not a common word in Hebrew. It's like the
Right.
word demon occurs maybe twice in the Hebrew Bible,
Mhm.
because and we're not even sure what it means. Those kinds of things, again, going back to the context, they kind of knew what they were talking about, so they didn't have to explain it. But all those various things, other religions are evil. That is all selective reading of the Bible.
Yeah.
But if you take it literally, then what choice do you have? But say, okay, well, here we go. They must be evil. And I think that's one of the reasons, again, that learning the context is so important because if you do, it dispels a lot of these tendencies to try to punish and hate other people just for being who they are.
Hmm.
I like in my book, I said, like it right at the end, messages, the messages of love from Christ get corrupted in the hands of men because a lot of the time, the reason why people are promoting demonic fantasy is I found money, power, or both. That
Mhm.
they want something from it, and it pays to have people afraid and to keep them under control.
Yeah, that's very true.
So, Steve, we probably you've been on for a while, and we greatly appreciate it. We probably have about, I'd say, 14 more minutes. Is there anything that you would like to specifically talk about or promote while we have you on?
Not really, in the other than the sense of, do educate yourselves, for just to saying to listeners, and don't take the word of anyone for it. I mean, check it out and see what you can find. When I taught, I used to tell my students, don't take my word for it. Check up, follow me up, check my sources, do what you need to do. Think about things, and try not uh, to be quick to jump to assessments of this is evil or this is demonic.
Mhm.
Stop and test it. I think that's the important thing here. And yeah, if you're interested in my books, I'm certainly glad. They're expensive. I know that. I'm not going to say go out and buy them, but if you have ever any questions about them, I'm always glad to answer comments left on my blog. So feel free to get in touch, and I'll do my best to keep the conversation going.
Perfect, Steve. One thing that I watched from one of your videos is and I still want to hear what the difference between paper and parchment paper is. But when you rolled out your degree, and where you said this means something because you dedicated your life, and I know you stated, I forgot what it was you were a specific expert in that you focused on. I believe it was probably an old. Um, Akkadian or Mesopotamian deity, but I could be wrong on that. You could correct me. But what you showed was that you put your life effort to doing research and educating yourself. But one thing you said is, follow up on resources, educate yourself further. See if there's a varying different opinion. But one thing that for us to tell our listeners, which are primarily the paranormal people and maybe the academics, but in the paranormal world, education is not really a foundation that you see most in the paranormal field. Like if it's education, it's self-taught, it's a library. People aren't going out and getting degrees in certain realities. Like when we talk about this, do I have a degree in divinity? No, not necessarily, but I study culture. I have a psychology background. Victoria has a folklore background. You have an ancient religions background, but we've dedicated our time to see proper research, proper diagnoses of certain things that have been had multiple lenses on specific topics. So education is very important, listeners. So if this is something that you love, yes, go get the field experience. Go apply it, but also learn what you're attempting to apply as well. One of the largest issues we have is demonologists everywhere. I've dedicated um, almost over 2 decades, or if not over 2 decades, doing this line of work, more so 15 years of actually applying it, but over 2 decades of research and going down that rabbit hole, talking to people such as yourself, and getting a better grasp at um, the thought out there and what's out there and what we can read and not take into our own translation, but what is actually matter of fact. And so that's important. Education is hugely important. It takes a lot of time and dedication, blood, sweat, and tears, as all three of us know, and more specifically you, Steve, with your doctorate. But it is important. So, for our listeners, educate yourself. Do not follow the trend. Do not think everything's a demonic entity. Watch the movies, but understand that they are entertainment. Listen to the
Mhm.
music, but understand it's a method to sell an album and get that attention. Do these things exist? That is up for debate. I might believe they do because of experiences I had after applying science and looking at it through certain different lenses and having these experiences. But once again, it's been a rarity. But that's where education comes into play. That's where you are able to become objective instead of subjective. And I really wanted to really kind of go strong on that statement you made about education. Victoria, you have anything else?
Honestly, more of a fun question. What's your favorite demon movie?
Hmm. I'm gonna have to go back to The Exorcist. I just think it is such a good movie.
Mhm.
Uh, I mean, as one of my pet peeves is that people say as soon as you say something like that, they say, "Oh, well, it's not really a horror movie," because any movie that's good can't really be horror, but it is, and it is just such a good movie on so many levels,
I
and
agree.
I just can't get past it. I mean, I've seen many, many demon movies. As a matter of fact, I tend to watch movies just about every weekend, and I would say probably a good third of them have a demonic element to them. I mean, there's a demon in the movie in some sort, and
Mhm.
nothing comes close. It just that movie. It really is in the right mood. It can terrify me, but it always makes me feel hopeful at the end.
Mhm.
Mm, yeah,
Okay. My favorite's Hereditary. Came out in 2018. I love Ari Aster. But I agree about The Exorcist. It was iconic. It's seminal. Like it is so important to the genre that if you haven't seen it, you should go see it. And try not to like bring in your own stuff with it. But unfortunately it's been parodied many, many times. But I my favorite one is because Ari Aster brought King Payman to life in a completely different, terrifying way. But I love new horror and the direction that it's going and how complicated his movies are. So that's my personal thought, but I happen to agree about The Exorcist as
yeah.
well.
I like The Exorcist. It's a timeless classic. It's a cult classic. I'd have to say my favorite one out of all of them is because it had a different twist. Was definitely Insidious. I know it's more entertainment,
I
but
do love Insidious.
I like the idea of the astral projection and all that. It just was to me. It was a whole a different spin on the dynamic, and it also had that drama, right? It had that emotion,
Mhm.
like I want to get my son back, right?
Yeah.
Being a parent, you feel like that dread, like this kid's in like a coma, but really there's actual other things going beyond. And then of course more throughout the movies they get a little bit crazier. But Insidious to me was just like it was different. It was also demonic in essence, right? But
They never came out and said that. Like, I
and
mean, they did once, like
yeah.
in the first one, but like, yeah, what I found interesting about it is that they didn't really like ascribe everything as demonic, that there were other spirits there too that also wanted to be kind of alive again, and that's why it happened the way that it did. But there was one that was like,
Mm,
"Oh, this is, this one is a demon," but they didn't explain him. He was a secular demon, which I
mm,
found very interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, his iconography was very clearly in the old school demon, though. You could tell by the way the makeup was done that this is meant to be a demon. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
One last note before we let you go, Steve. If you want to stay in the back while we wrap it up, please do. If not, I understand we've kept a lot of your time, but for our listeners, and I really want to approach this education thing one more time, and I want people to go read your book if they can afford them, of course. And I have to do my best to actually go pick up your books too and read it beside watching your videos or reading your blogs. Is what if there was one scholar that you could tell people to go read right now, based on this topic that will enlighten them, who would it be?
It's going to seem like it's coming out of left field, but I would say Jeff Kripal. He is from Rice University uh, because I think he is one of the very few scholars in an accredited school who is willing to open himself to possibilities. And I think that his work on the impossible, Authors of the Impossible, is one of his books, really fantastic, and will I think again give you a profound sense that that there's a lot to learn yet.
perfect way to end it, Steve. And once again, thank you so much. I know you made Victoria's night. You made my night with your insight. And I hope for the listeners, they enjoyed it. What is your website? I'm going to post it in the link real quick.
It's I don't know if you need the www, but Steve A. Wiggins, all one word, .com.
Perfect. I'm going to post it in the chat. So if you are interested in Steve, his blog is phenomenal. I'm going to try to empower him to do YouTube videos again after 2 years or however long it's been. But go to steveawiggins.com and you can find his books there. You can find his blog there. Um, you'll see the work that he's done. So once again, I appreciate it, Steve.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here. That was incredibly illuminating. I'm so psyched now just to return to even my own book and watch these movies kind of with these lenses that you've given us to take a look at this phenomena.
Thank you very much.
All right. So Steve, if you want to stay, please stay. If not, thank you. Whoa.
Right?
Oh, what a man of knowledge. Just the way he presents it and his insight is so fascinating. I think
Mhm.
people, we had Kyle Cobb last week, which was quite knowledgeable, and we had John Zaffis the month before that, which I think has brought this topic to so many different levels and shows people how expansive it truly is. It's not you can't look through a microscope and just see it.
Right.
It's like you have to see a planetary telescope and see the universe and the
And the
galaxies, and that
cosmos working together. I know.
it, it's crazy. So, but I know this made your night. I'm so happy. It's always nice when you can meet your heroes or the people you look up to, and they're actually down to earth and willing to actually sit down with you and conversate and have deep, narrow, or even deep discussions.
and they
But
can fill in your own knowledge gaps because there
yeah,
are things like obviously I'm not a historian. I'm a folklorist. So history isn't my strongest suit, especially when it comes to like biblical culture. But I love that he has done that research. He
mhm,
has looked at documents he has that PhD and he can fill in those gaps for me. He's definitely going to be somebody that I reach out to as I'm working on this next book about Christian secrets and demonic or satanic secrets in film, just
yeah,
because it's so such a big topic, and I think he has interesting insight.
mhm,
And will like yeah, I definitely want to have a conversation with him personally about what he sees going into this. And I do love that this show is meant to be us sort of filling in our own knowledge gaps, but also teaching everybody else and showing everyone what we've all learned.
yeah.
Um, that it's not just like us talking at you, it's more interactive. Although, sorry guys, we are kind of ignoring you right now. It's not on purpose, the comments. It's more like we just got so sucked into what Steve was saying that we kind of forgot to respond. So, hey, everybody, we're happy you're here. If you do have a question, this would be the best time to put that to us.
Yeah, and then on top of it too is we're not we talked about education. I'm going to harp on it because it's important, but we're not the all being experts either. All three of us aren't, and so to say, like, there's always going to be somebody with a different perspective or deeper knowledge, and that's the great thing. This is to empower you to want to learn, to look up scholars, read
Mhm.
books, um, and maybe not necessarily go do it, but become engaged in how many things there are that you can read about the topic and um, get things from it. And speaking of that, actually, we do have an announcement. I'm not going to actually announce it tonight, so if you listened the whole way, uh, but we do have a mini episode coming up next Tuesday, August 11th, where we are going to make the announcement of what I teased you guys at the beginning with. But so August 11th, it's just going to be a mini episode. Could be 10, 15, 20 minutes long, but we're going to talk about what the announcement is, and we're going to announce it then. And hopefully people are interested in it. People become engaged in it. And that'd be great. But following true monthly episode, and I know we're only once per month, and we've been doing our best to get out shorts, and we're going to try to do our best to get more content out there in the future. But September 1st, our September guest is Dave Giuliano, and the topic is investigating the demonic. If you don't know
Mhm.
who Dave Giuliano is, he's the guy that created the Shadowlands website when the internet really just started becoming a thing and blooming. It was the first paranormal website where it showed locations of all paranormal locations throughout the country. And he's also been doing this for over 40, I think 40 or over 30 years. And, I've had the pleasure to become an acquaintance of his, a friend. I was a consultant and worked for his team, Sanctuary Paranormal, which is a spiritual warfare outfit that deals with negative cases or residential cases. So I'm really excited to have Dave on in September because we'll approach it in a different way. Instead of media or history or introduction, we'll talk about how we apply demonology in the field. And he is a fellow demonologist that I respect. And I think that if you don't know who Dave is, you should tune in because you will get down and dirty of how we actually apply this study in real everyday life.
I haven't gotten to meet Dave yet. Pretty much everybody that we've had on here, except for Kyle, who I had interviewed for my last book. I don't know most of these people. These are mostly like James's friends or people that he sort of knows that we like end up getting on the show. But I haven't met Dave yet. I'm super excited about this because it's application of the things that I found when I was doing my classification system of things that I'm sure he has come across.
Hmm.
So I'm really excited to talk to him about what that is like because I don't go in the field. I'm a little too psychic for that. And my protections are perhaps not strong enough at this moment in time. But, like Johnny said, I'll probably get sucked into it eventually. But for
Yeah.
now, I'm on the research side.
And to leave it on the note, reading, studying about demons is safe. It's engaging.
It's much safer.
It shows you the development of human society and culture and the adaptation or interpretation of evil. But when you apply it, it is dangerous.
It
It
is.
it is not as a warning. It's not to make this more spooky and entertainmentful. It really is dangerous. It is horrifying. It is emotional, and it does take a big impact on your life, and will shape you as a person. In the future and in the present. So, for people that want to apply it or are interested in studying it and then applying it, you're gonna from that episode, you're gonna find out right away that maybe this is not the line of work you want to get into.
Mhm.
And you're gonna hear some of his stories, you're gonna hear some of his tactics, and you're gonna hear what real life application looks like in this field.
Even from the research side of it, I can tell all of that.
Hmm.
That this is dangerous. It is not only dangerous to the person being possessed, it is dangerous to the exorcist. It is dangerous to field demonologists. It is dangerous. We cannot like say that enough because there are people who are not going to listen to us.
Hmm.
But this is not for the faint of heart, and this is
Yeah.
not something that you're going to walk away unscathed.
Yeah.
Even
And,
doing what I do
yep.
has its toll.
Yep. And to leave it on the note of media, demons and media, it's not The Conjuring. It's not being a superhero and
Not a
being,
monster hunter. Like,
yeah, it's not. So, you guys will learn a lot with Dave on the show September 1st, but please tune in August 11th for our mini episode uh, next Tuesday. I'm excited.
and if you have a question in the meantime, you can post it on the 11th, or you can send it to it at 9gatespodcast@gmail. We
Mm.
do want to answer your questions. We do want to talk about all the things that you guys want to talk about. It's just it's kind of hard to, even in like a 3-hour block, because it's always constantly moving. But there are other franchises that are very important. Somebody had mentioned The Omen, hugely important to Antichrist lore, and it changed the way things were perceived, especially in regards to 666, the Antichrist, the false prophet, and Satan all being like in this convoluted knot. But I talk about that in Hell, Horror, and Despair. If you are interested in it, it is available on my Shopify, which is on all of my social media. But you can also get it on Amazon if you like, but it won't be directly from me and it won't be signed. That's from my publisher. But that's only if it interests you, because it is about horror. It is about movies and film and the way it like changes public perception of things. So if that doesn't interest you, cool, that's fine. There are other things in demonology that are worth picking up.
Yes, and we have many more months to come with many great guests. So
Mhm.
hopefully you guys take this ride with us if you're a new listener or a new watcher. And if you haven't watched our previous shows, please do so. Like I said, education is important. You will learn something. Or if you didn't learn something, hopefully it gives you the ability to want to learn more.
If you
And
want to
make
say formal education is not even fully what we're talking about,
mm,
because like James had brought up, formal education is not everything in the paranormal. I do believe it has helped me personally, but experience is actually important, even
mm,
if sometimes the public rejects that a little bit. Like, sometimes the public doesn't really believe that 20 years of paranormal investigating means anything. I think it does.
mhm.
You know, I think you are going to see some stuff
Yeah.
and understand things differently than from somebody who maybe just started their paranormal investigating journey.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. You're gonna learn a lot of do's and don'ts, and you're gonna learn a lot of oh my's, and you're also gonna learn a lot about what not to do and how to look at things differently over time. And I think it's important, and I hope you
mhm.
guys enjoy this episode tonight. And I look forward to the 11th, and I look forward to the 1st of September.
Yep,
Everybody
we're
have a
gonna have a
good
lot of
night.
fun.